In today's tier list, I'll be ranking all 69 melee armor heroes from SSS all the way down to D. I'll be basing my rankings on how well these heroes perform as near save units. Now technically ranged armor like tomes, bows, and daggers could be near save units, but they aren't optimal at all. They lose access to hardy fighter, defensive specials, and have to run a close counter skill in their A slot, meaning they are losing even more stats, even considering the upgraded close counter skills. Because of this reason, they will not be on this tier list. My main focus for this tier list will be Aether Raid's offense and defense, because those are the two main game modes that near save units are used in. But I will be considering some duels as well when it is applicable. Okay, let's quickly look at the list of effects a near save unit typically wants. Now I'm not going to go over each effect, but typically the more effects a near save can have of these, the better they will perform. The major effects that a near save absolutely wants to have is damage reduction. Damage reduction piercing is much less common in melee matchups, so DR is very valuable. One of the biggest effects a near save must have, in my opinion, is guard. Guard is the most essential effect on Aether Raid's defense, as it makes gale forcing much more difficult, which is one of the most powerful strategies in Aether Raids. The last effect I need to mention before we start is stat lines. Arcane weapons have completely changed how we must analyze near save units, and because they are inheritable, stat lines are more important than ever. Also, as much as I love arcane weapons, they made making this tier list extremely difficult, as I had to test matchups for every single hero on this list with a million different conditions. And because arcane weapons take up such a large portion of this tier list, I will not be going over every single hero on this tier list, as it would take forever, and a majority of the heroes who are using arcane weapons will have the exact same build. So I will be clumping many of them together. Okay, let's jump in. At the very bottom of the tier list is D tier. Now unlike my other save tier list, D in this case stands for don't. Technically, Tiki, Fjorm, and Duma can be good near save units, but they need kit overhauls in order to fulfill that role, because they have distant counter weapons or preference far save skills. It's just not worth it in my opinion, as you are losing what makes them unique heroes and powerful. Just stick to far save with them and you're gonna have a better time. Now when it comes to Fallen Elgard, she can near save, but once again, you are losing out on what makes her powerful and unique. A free distant counter and a free gale force. Also, her damage reduction only works in the first combat each phase, meaning if she runs into multiple melee opponents, she becomes much easier to kill. Okay, let's move on to C tier. Now C tier is composed of green dragons, and the reason for this is the meta itself. The meta is heavily red dominated at the moment. The majority of the deadly melee threats are red, and they are everywhere. From Brave Seliph to Legendary Nana, Lucia, Alir, Altina, and most notably Summer Elgard. Summer Elgard is the best Gale Forcer in the game. She's extremely popular, and due to Raging Storm giving a guaranteed follow-up attack against dragons and beasts, green dragons in particular are really bad on Aether Raid's defense as near saves. Elgard essentially gets weapon triangle and can quad sometimes. When it comes to the offense, these units can work well, but you're gonna need some solid support, and also hope you don't run into something like Brave Seliph. Now B tier is where your options really open up. These heroes can all work well as near save heroes, but they do have their disadvantages and typically have less optimized stat lines than the heroes above them. Okay, let's start off with Duma at the bottom of B tier. Unfortunately, Duma has some big weaknesses as a near save unit. First of all, he is a dragon, which means he can struggle against Summer Elgard, like I mentioned earlier. 2. Naga exists in Astra Season, which is pretty much a free win button against Duma in most situations. And third, and the most damning reason, is that Duma does not get mythic buffs. This means typically Duma will have anywhere from 10 to 15 less HP than other defensive near saves, and just overall less stats, which really hurts his matchups. And while he does have the major upside of being a mythic, which means he takes up one less team spot, overall he just doesn't perform as well as other heroes in this role. The other thing you'll notice is there are a ton of green axe heroes in this tier. That is because, like I mentioned earlier, green is the weakest near save color at the moment, though there are some major exceptions to this you'll see later. Not only does green have a major color disadvantage, but I'd also argue they have the weakest arcane weapon when it comes to near saving in particular. Arcane Downfall doesn't have the wonderful guard that the Arcane Sword does, or the guaranteed follow-up attack like the Arcane Lance, and it definitely holds it back. We also have Fallen Tiki down in B tier. Even with Arcane Grima, she's in a weird speed tier where she's not fast enough to keep up with the meta threats, and also not bulky enough to completely abandon speed. She can work on offense with some good support, but honestly there are dragons who just work better than her. And then lastly, we have some Lance armors with less than optimal stat lines. If they are a favorite, they can definitely work, but they're gonna need some help. A tier is where we have some really great near save units. These heroes can all do fantastic jobs on Aether Raid's offense, but they can struggle a bit on Aether Raid's defense. And one of the reasons for that is that many of them are speed-based near saves. Speed near saves are amazing on offense, because you have a lot more control over speed via supports, mythic buffs, and even debuffs on the enemy team. Ether Raid's offense naturally has the advantage when it comes to speed, which means they can struggle on Ether Raid's defense. After a ridiculous amount of testing and sims, I found that a majority of matchups came down to just a couple points of speed, and so I honestly can't give these heroes my full recommendation for Ether Raid's defense. Okay, let's start off with Winter Sothis. Sothis has some great stuff going for her. She can be very fast, has a powerful preference special that with Special Fodder 4 heals for even more, and even abandons her Dragon weakness. She's a fantastic near save on offense, but be careful against units who can pack a big punch because she doesn't have the best defensive bulk. Even with how old Spring of Thune is, she's still really good. Her combination of penalty neutralization, armor effectiveness, follow-up denial, and adaptive damage makes her a great hardy fighter user and difficult to kill. Next up are 3 of the best Arcane Downfall users. These axe users just have the most optimal stat lines that allow them to survive and secure kills. If I was to choose the best Arcane Downfall user, it has to be Amelia, especially with her resplendent stats. She's actually fast enough to double by herself, which helps a ton with Arcane Downfall, not providing a guaranteed follow-up attack. Still wouldn't recommend her on ARD though. Our next axe save is Valentine's Gustav. Great hero with a solid preference weapon and an optimized stat line. With the build I'm showing, he just takes hits and retaliates with some big bonfires to secure kills. Now Picnic Felicia is up next, and this hero is really good. Her preference weapon offers a ridiculous amount of stats, which is really nice when you are relying on speed. She makes great use of Hardy Fighter, and thanks to her good speed, she can still double and secure kills. Definitely a slept on near save unit. After that, we have a large group of what I consider the speed arcane sword users. Now like I mentioned earlier, these heroes live and die based off winning speed checks. If they're fast, they secure kills and survive a ton of battles, but if they lose the speed check, they explode. Now the arcane sword is really good because it can provide guard, which means the A slot is much more flexible for sword users. So for these fast swords, you are typically going to be running a speed boosting Bond 4 skill or attack speed Unity. Both of these are great options. And then our final hero in A tier is going to be Winter Hilda. She is very fast and gets to use the wonderful Arcane Lance, but just like the speedy swords, she lives and dies based off speed, which makes her absolutely fantastic on offense, but not as solid on defense. S tier has amazing near save units, and honestly these heroes can be some of the best in the game with the right conditions. The majority of these heroes are great on offense and defense. First up is Fallen Rhea. Rhea is very unique compared to her contemporaries. She essentially relies on blowing up the enemy in one shot as she cannot double. Now she's able to do this because she kind of gets 2 icebergs on retaliation, one from her own special and one from her weapon that is based off the foe's resistance. When you combine this with her massive damage reduction from her B slot, she can be really difficult to take down, which makes her a great near save. Though her biggest weakness by far is when she misses a kill, which can happen. Our next 4 heroes are the most well-rounded users of the Arcane Lance. Now I do think Hilda is better when it comes to offense, but these 4 are much better on defense in all of my testing. Unlike Hilda, who needs to build speed, these 4 all use the build I'm showing on the right with Gatry. It gives them a ridiculous amount of bulk, especially when you consider all the extra HP from mythic buffs. And thanks to the Arcane Lance, they can quickly recharge Pavis, meaning Hardy Fighter is ridiculously powerful on them. After that, we have 2 defensive Arcane Grima users. That's right, after all my testing I found that Fallen Male Grima performs considerably better with Arcane Grima than his own preference weapon. Both Technicia and Grima want to use the build I'm showing right now. Feel free to use attack defense near save though if you want. These 2 perform very similar to Spring of Thune, but they just have a more optimized stat line and it allows them to secure more kills and take bigger hits. Hardy Fighter is by far their best build, so definitely go with that. And then the final group in S tier is super bulky Arcane Sword users. These guys are just ridiculously strong. Unlike the speedy Arcane Swords, they just fully invest in the bulk, and that means that their flexible A slot can go to close defense 4, which is really good, as it not only gives a lot of bulk, but most importantly it turns off visible stat buffs on the foe. This is massive as it not only robs the offensive threats of a possible 6 stats, but any type of bonus doubler shenanigans, which are quite popular. I definitely could not recommend Arden and Zethiel more when it comes to Ether Raid's defense. Not only are they ridiculously bulky, but they have massive HP pools, which is a big boon when you get hit by a bolt tower, as they'll still have HP left. The only real weakness these heroes can have is securing kills on offense, though a lot of that can be remedied with really good supports. Double S tier is where preference weapons really start to make a difference in performance. These near saves all have some unique factors that let them stand out amongst their peers, and in all honesty, I didn't expect some of these heroes to make it this high up. First up is the Thune. Now Thune's Refine didn't seem all that strong to me at first because it doesn't synergize that well with Hardy Fighter. But the truth is, she just doesn't need it. I found the build on the left to be amazing. It essentially allows her to have a ton of bulk thanks to her weapon neutralizing debuffs and Wily Fighter neutralizing the foe's bonuses. When you add her sweet 70% damage reduction in, she actually becomes quite difficult to kill. Now the biggest surprise on this whole tier list has to be Legendary Hector. Originally I had him placed in A tier, but the more I tested him and ran him through sims, the more ridiculous the results became. I could not believe how good this hero is as a near save unit. I know Phaeology has mentioned this before, but I didn't know it extended to Ether Raid's offense and defense as well. And as a legendary, he also works great in Arena too, which is really nice. He gets damage reduction, massive amounts of stats, and follow-up denial, and while he can't be used in every season in Ether Raids due to being a legendary, he makes up for that by also being very versatile outside of being a near save too, which is a nice bonus. Okay, Valentine's Lucina is one of the most unique near saves in the entire game. This is largely due to Future Witness allowing her to swap while granting herself another action. But what takes it to the next level is the buff she gives herself and her swap target, which neutralizes the foe's bonuses. This is massive as it can completely flip matchups on their head, especially speed matchups as it allows Lucina to get a big advantage. You add that to a fast near save with built-in damage reduction and you have a top tier near save. Next up is our two former meta menaces, Ithune and Brave Hector. Ascendant Ithune is essentially a dragon version of Brave Hector, which has its advantages of being able to target resistance, which is typically the weaker stat for melee nukes, and also an updated stat line. Ascendant Ithune does a wonderful job on offense or defense, but you will need to run two different builds, and the reason for that is she actually does not have a guaranteed follow-up attack like Hector does. And this is what I think makes Brave Hector actually shine more as a near save. He has more build flexibility, which makes him a solid choice for offense or defense. On offense, you could run him with Special Fighter 4, and it provides the healing and guard he wants, while also providing him an easier way to kill kills with Bonfire. While in defense, you can go full survival mode with Hardy Fighter, and it makes him really difficult to take down. As the meta has ramped up and Hector has slowly lost value as a far save, I think transforming him into a near save is a great option to keep him relevant. Here is another hero I underestimated a bit. Just like base Ithune, his weapon didn't synergize well with Hardy Fighter, so I was a bit apprehensive about his role. But Forsyth proves to be a powerful near saver. The thing with Forsyth is that he needs a guaranteed follow-up attack from his B slot to really shine, as it allows for his massive healing from his preference weapon to take full effect. The build I'm showing has proven to be his most powerful on offense and defense. You just completely abandon Hardy Fighter and rely on this unit's ridiculous bulk and healing for his survival. Forsyth easily proves to be one of the best near saves in the game, though he can struggle against the likes of Brave Seliph with his nasty Miracle and Spring Carla. Another fantastic lance armor is Winter Ephraim, and Ephraim works completely opposite of how other near saves work. While other near saves focus on survival, Ephraim is out here securing kills. That's right, Ephraim's main focus is to blow up the enemy with his Brave effect before they can even get a chance to double. Now the one major thing you need to focus on with Ephraim is his attack stat, as he needs to win an attack check to get the Brave effect. You essentially have two builds to go for. First up is the Special Fighter 4 build that is going to allow Ephraim to retaliate with a big bonfire on the first counterattack, which is important for the Brave Seliph matchup as it can allow him to get past the Miracle effect. When it comes to his A slot, either Attack Defense Bond 4 or Attack Defense Unity works great here. The other build is a quad build where you use either Slick or Wily Fighter in the B slot. If you're going to use him alongside Peony in Light Season, use Wily Fighter as it will also allow him to neutralize the foe's bonuses. Overall, Winter Ephraim is a great choice on offense and defense in Ether Raids, but you do need to invest into him so his attack stat is quite high. Okay, this is probably one of my more controversial placements, but rearmed Grima is going to end up in double S tier. Now don't get me wrong, Grima is easily one of the best offensive near saves in the entire game. She's extremely powerful, works amazingly with Hardy Fighter, and can stack a ton of speed. I absolutely recommend her for offense, but when it comes to defense, Grima can suffer a bit. First of all, she is a speed-based near save, which has a big disadvantage on defense, but my biggest problem is that Grima doesn't have an easy way to get guard, and guard is the most important effect for a near save on defense. Without it, you are going to be living in Gale Force City, which is definitely not the place you want to be. Now you could put it in her steel slot, but then you are losing a massive amount of speed, which she needs to perform well. And you can't replace her A slot, as that is so much of her power. So you're kind of stuck in a situation where you want guard from an external source, which limits your defensive team building. You can make it work, but I just think there are better options when it comes to defense. And I think Winter Black Knight is in a similar situation when it comes to defense. I'm not going to repeat all my points, he doesn't have the guard problem like Grima does, but he does suffer as a green speedy near save. Instead, let's focus on why Black Knight is one of the best offensive near saves, and it all comes down to Winter Black Knight's focus. He wants to Black Luna you in the face. While many other near saves are relying on defensive specials and Hardy Fighter, Black Knight's PRF weapon can only function with an offensive special, and man does it put in work. We have damage reduction, full no follow-up, but most importantly, Winter Black Knight gets a ridiculous amount of stats. He can get up to a +5 attack, 15 defense, 15 resistance, and most importantly, 15 speed. Now, like I mentioned earlier, speed battles are neck and neck. A couple extra speed can completely flip a matchup on its head, so a free extra 10 speed is ridiculously good and allows Black Knight to win matchups that he honestly shouldn't. He can take on units like Brave Self, and because of Black Luna, can actually get past that annoying miracle. The build I'm showing on the right is what you will be going for though. You can swap attack speed bond 4 for Unity, but if there's no debuff, you do lose out on 2 speed, which can matter. If you do want to go the full Unity route and it's Earth season, match this guy up with Legendary Male Robin and watch him tear through entire teams. We have finally reached SSS Tier. This is where the best of the best near saves exist. These heroes are ridiculously powerful and other than one exception, work great in both offense and defense. Of course, Intelligent Systems had to release a new near save and new fire skill on the new heroes banner instead of just releasing Engage. So I had to come back and re-record and re-edit this. Our newest near save, Gilliam, is very good from the sims I have ran so far. The IOT shield visible buff seems quite niche, but the attack defense debuff based off his defense is massive. It seems to be only based off his visible defense though, but even so, it's typically between -9 to -13 attack. So just to be safe, because I haven't got a chance to test him personally, I'm going to put him at the end of SSS Tier, but he honestly could be up there next to Shell. Okay, when it comes to Eventual Fighter 4, I found it to be a bit underwhelming, and that's because it has a lot of overlap with existing preference weapons and all the arcane weapons. The Arcane Lance has all of its effects essentially, the sword only gains special acceleration, and the axe gains a guaranteed follow-up attack, but that's all, so you might as well just go with a better fighter skill in my opinion. Hardy Fighter is typically just better overall, so I think its only real place is on Gilliam himself, on Ether Raid's offense, and on range saves. Okay, let's move on to Halloween Myrrh. Now Myrrh has an effect you're going to be seeing a lot of in SSS Tier, and that is follow-up damage reduction. The reason why this is so powerful for a near save unit is that it works extremely well with Hardy Fighter. Essentially, Hardy Fighter drastically reduces the damage of the first hit, and then Myrrh's 70% damage reduction eats up the second hit. This also works really well on Myrrh because she has a guaranteed follow-up attack in her weapon, meaning she isn't reliant on a B slot to give her that. This allows Myrrh to run the optimized build I'm showing and perform extremely well on defense and offense. The only switch you would make for defense is putting on the deflect melee seal to avoid Brave shenanigans. Okay, here she is, Summer Altina and Elgard in all their greatness. Now Summer Elgard works similar to how Winter Ephraim does. She wants to kill some enemies, but the major difference is that she cheats. She has a way easier condition for her Brave effect, and she also gets some free damage reduction. Just like Ephraim, you want a lot of attack on this unit, as she deals with units like Self and other scary offensive threats. Also, Wily Fighter works really well on her, as she can remove those annoying defense buffs and allow her to quad against opponents without no follow-up. She can also run a Hardy Fighter build extremely well if you want a more defensive near save, but you will need to provide some additional support so she can secure kills. So Mufasa is a premier far save unit. The funny thing is, he's also a premier near save unit. As I mentioned earlier with Halloween Myrrh, follow-up damage reduction is really good, and Mufasa essentially just has a better version of Myrrh's weapon. He gets the same follow-up damage reduction, but he gets way more stats. He can get up to 19 attack, defense, and resistance, and 4 speed. And to top all that off, he also gets AoE damage reduction, which is relevant. When you get to the highest tiers of Ether Raids, like up in rank 1 area, you will see that a lot of people bring a Tank Buster, running an AoE just to get past near saves. But that doesn't work on Mufasa. Even though his built-in distant counter doesn't offer anything, he's just a fantastic unit, and the only annoying thing can be is getting him to transform, but honestly it's not that difficult in Ether Raids. Okay, here he is, my demon boy, the nightmare of anima season, and our new free-to-play god, Fomortis. Fomortis is one hell of a near save unit. In fact, I think he's better at near saving than far saving. And why is that? Let's all say it together. Follow up damage reduction. This easily makes Hardy Fighter his best build, and with Slaying, he can even run Pavis, which makes him even tankier. Now unlike Mufasa or Myrrh, who may punish you a bit for missing a kill, Fomortis ruins your life if you don't kill him. That's right, Nightmare, his preference A skill, just turns off an ally's turn within 4 spaces of the target, and it can hit multiple targets if they are the same distance away. I cannot tell you how many times I have already seen people completely forget about this or just not play around it properly and immediately lose after their first attack. It's honestly one of the most stupid effects in the entire game, and the best part is that because of this effect, you just need to focus on Fomortis surviving. If he survives, he ruins the match for the opponent, and if he's transformed, even if your far save dies, he becomes a nuisance to kill. But the final thing that makes Fomortis so impressive is that he's a mythic himself. This means that he isn't taking up a team slot and creates room for more threats on your team. And he also buffs the rest of your team too with his mythic buff, which is nice. But most importantly, he's surviving these powerful melee nukes without mythic buffs. That's right, every other hero on this list except Duma gets the advantage of 10 to 15 additional HP and extra stats. But Mortis doesn't get any of this and still performs like a champ. This unit is just ridiculous. Now obviously he can only be run on offense during Chaos Season, which is a downside, but even so, he's easily one of the best defensive near saves in the entire game. At number 2 on my near save tier list is Shell, and this unit is so slept on. She is just absolutely ridiculous. Her weapon effect causes the biggest attack debuff in the entire game. It transforms deadly threats into wet noodles. This is just really strong. On offense, go with the build I'm showing here. Swap to Wily Fighter if you're using her alongside Peony. This build just lets Shell eat up opponents after they bounce off of her. And if you want to use her on defense, use this build. It won't secure as many kills, but the only thing that really kills her is Spring Carla, and that's because she's a dirty cheater. Now one thing to consider is that Shell does rely on visible stat checks, meaning she does need a bit of investment to get going. You're going to want merges, dragon flowers, and whatever else you can give her. But if you do invest into her, she's going to perform wonderfully. To the surprise of probably no one, the very best near save in the entire game is Brave Edelgard. This unit is just busted. They essentially took a fantastic hero and gave her a great refine. She has almost everything needed to be a fantastic near save, and so much more. First of all, say it with me one more time, follow up damage reduction. It's so damn good. She gets free guard in her weapon with a very easy condition, meaning she's free to run close defense 4, which turns off visible buffs for the foe, which in turn turns off bonus doubler shenanigans. She gets a billion free stats, up to 21 attack, defense, and resistance. She gets a free 7 HP heal on hits during combat. She gets 2 movement and warping. That's right, she has better movement than an infantry unit as an armor. She is slaying and even a guaranteed follow-up attack during both phases. Brave Edelgard's only real weakness is getting blown up in one hit or brave attacks, and the latter can be worked around with deflect melee, which I recommend on defense. This unit just works ridiculously well in either its offense, defense, and even summoner duels. She's just really powerful, and because of that, she's the best near save unit in the entire game. Okay, and with that, my near save tier list is complete. All 69 melee armors rank from SSS down to D. I hope this tier list was able to help you decide which near save armors you should be investing into, and maybe even give you some ideas for builds. I'd love to thank all my members who support make these videos possible, and if you enjoyed the video, like and subscribe. This has been Oblivion, I'll catch you all later.